Chapter 4799. Muchen didn't say anything, but he looked at their master nervously. He wanted to know if it was their mother, as their elder brother had said. Emperor Qing glanced at the three of them and pulled back his sleeve, which was being pulled by Yu. He slowly walked to the stone table under the tree and sat down. He said, "In this world of immortals, there's no one else who has the ability to ascend except your parents. Your father, Xianyuan Mose, failed to ascend last time, so naturally, it's impossible for him to ascend at this time. So, the person today is undoubtedly your mother. Then will our mother be in danger? Will she be able to ascend smoothly?" Muchen couldn't help but ask. "Master, will those people who want to harm my father and mother take this opportunity to make a move on my mother? Will it be very dangerous for my mother to ascend now?" Hao asked worriedly. "Master." Yu hurriedly called out. Emperor Qing raised his hand and stopped them from asking further. "Those who want to harm her will naturally not let go of such a good opportunity. Whether she can ascend smoothly will naturally depend on your mother. Master, I beg you to help our mother." Yu knelt down, and raising her small face, she pitifully begged him. "Master! Master!" Hao and Muchen also knelt down. Although they didn't say it, their meaning was clear. "Get up." Emperor Qing looked at them and said, "It's useless to kneel because your mother's path is different from others. The things she will do in the future will be more difficult and dangerous than her ascension today. If she can't resolve the crisis and ascend smoothly today, how can she face her enemies in the future?" He paused and glanced at them. "Don't tell me that if she encounters danger in the future and encounters something she can't solve, you will kneel down and beg me to help her. You must know that everyone has their own mission, their own life, and their own difficulties. If you blindly rely on others for help, how long can others help you?" When the three of them heard his words, they were momentarily stunned. Perhaps because they were still young, they didn't quite understand, but they vaguely understood what he meant. Thus, the three of them looked at each other and paused for a moment. Then, they lowered their heads and said in a low voice, "Master, we were insensible." Emperor Qing nodded and said, "You may rise." The three of them responded and stood up. "Life and death are predestined. You don't have to worry. It's useless to worry. She has advanced today. She won't ascend in a day or two. Calm down and go back to cultivate," Emperor Qing said slowly. Hearing those words, the three of them moved their lips as if they wanted to say something. However, in the end, they didn't say anything. They only responded with a sound of acknowledgement before leaving together. Their mother was undergoing the heavenly lightning tribulation, so how could they calm down and cultivate? However, what could they do if they didn't cultivate? They were still young and couldn't help her with anything. "Let's go. Let's go back and cultivate. We have to believe in Mother. She can definitely do it." Hao held their hands and said firmly, "Yes, Mother will definitely ascend safely. At that time, maybe we will be able to see her again." Yu nodded with a serious expression on her face. "Let's go back and cultivate," Muchen also said. The three of them returned to the cave residence. Chapter 4800. The heavenly thunder in the sky faintly reverberated in the various heavenly realms. Day after day, the heavenly thunder and the sound of lightning made people's hearts hang in suspense. One day, 2 days passed, and the heavenly thunder was still roaring. 3 bolts of lightning fell every day, and after 3 bolts of lightning fell, the next day would be the next. Just like that, 3 to 5 days passed. Those who thought that Fengzhou would not be able to hold on could not help but be very surprised. Fengzhou's heavenly thunder tribulation was different from Mo Chen's. It was the same as Xianyuan Moses' heavenly thunder tribulation. There were only 3 bolts of heavenly thunder a day, and each bolt was more powerful than the last. Seeing that Fengjiu had endured 49 bolts of heavenly thunder, and she was still sitting cross-legged below, unharmed, the 4 great emperors in the upper immortal realm could not help but feel anxious. How can this be? We have clearly increased the power of the heavenly thunder and lightning. How can she still hold on? One of them said, anxiously pacing up and down in the main hall with his hands behind his back. Could it really be the destined phoenix star? Could she really have such good fortune? Another great emperor's brows were also filled with worry. Fengjiu was so strong, and her luck was so heaven-defying. If she really succeeded in ascending, would she be able to live a peaceful life in the future? At that time, they would not rest until one of them was dead. Have you forgotten? She has the ancient green lotus in her body. Moreover, I noticed that after being tempered by heavenly thunder every day, her body would be enveloped in a layer of green aura, and a green lotus would appear between her eyebrows. It is said that this ancient green lotus is the head of the 4 lotuses, and has the ability to quickly recover. I reckon that the green lotus has something to do with her being able to hold on until now. Another great emperor frowned and said in a low voice. After thinking for a while, he said, I think that increasing the power of the heavenly thunder and lightning will not be able to defeat her. On the contrary, she can withstand it. Her bones and tendons have been tempered even more, and her immortal body will only become stronger in the future. I think we have to attack from another side. One of the great emperors who had not spoken all this time pondered for a while, then looked at the person who spoke and asked, then in your opinion, how should we attack? Why don't we create a clone to deal with her? We can only deal with her if we go down there ourselves. Otherwise, no one in the lower immortal world is a match for her. If we can't obtain her personality now, then when she succeeds in her ascension, we'll have an endless battle to the death. If we send our clones down, our strength will also be restricted. I'm afraid that we won't be able to deal with her at all. Moreover, the risk is too great. Another person shook his head when he heard the first person's words. It was obvious that he refused. If you can't do this and you can't do that, then tell me, what should I do? The great emperor's mood became irritable when he heard that. Chapter 48:01. You're saying that when the last bolt of lightning strikes, the 4 of us will combine our strength to give her a heavy blow? One of them heard this and his expression changed slightly. No one knew what he was thinking. That's right. The great emperor nodded and said, although we've done something these days, we all know that the power of the lightning strikes is at most 20% of our strength. When the time comes, the 4 of us will each use 60 to 70% of our strength. Do you think that she can withstand 60 to 70% of our strength by herself? Will there be any risks? One of the more cautious great emperors asked hesitantly. What risks can there be? As long as we can kill her, even if she consumes too much spiritual energy and can't recover in a short period of time, what's the harm in resting for a while? The great emperor who made the suggestion said. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this method was feasible. The other 2 thought for a while and finally nodded, okay. Let's do it. Even if they had to hurt themselves, as long as they could kill the ghost Dr. Fengjiu, it would be worth it. Thus, the 4 of them began to conserve their strength. When the last bolt of lightning gathered and was ready to strike, the 4 of them would combine their strength to give Fengjiu a fatal blow. In the East Sea Spirit region, Guan Shilin and Wanyan Qianhua had arrived. Other than them, there were also the other captains of the 8 Phoenix Guards. They gathered here to guard her. While watching her advance, they were also worried. For the past few days, they had been watching the heavenly thunder in the sky strike Feng Ix's body with a terrifying airflow. At the same time as the heavenly thunder, there was also the lightning ray, which made them tremble with fear. Their hearts were tightly clenched, afraid that Feng 9 would not be able to bear it and fall down. She seems to be in a good condition. Wanyan Qianhua gently exhaled as he spoke. However, his hand was tightly holding Jun Ju Shang's hand. He didn't even realize that he had scratched a few marks on Jun Ju Shang's hand. Jun Ju Shang patted her hand gently and said, "Don't worry." This was not the first time she had experienced a tribulation. When had she not survived it? It's okay. Just relax. How can I relax? Mose is already in such a state, and he's still sleeping at the bottom of the sea. We don't even know when he'll wake up. If something happens to her, what should we do? The more she spoke, the more nervous and worried she became. Her beautiful eyes stared at Fengjiu in the distance. Xiao Jiu has already withstood 49 bolts of lightning. Don't worry. She'll be fine. I believe in her, Guan Shilin said, looking at Fengjiu in the distance. They couldn't see her clearly from here. One reason was because of the distance, and the other was because of the lightning pillars surrounding her. However, if they looked carefully, they could see the green lotus that appeared between her eyebrows, as well as the green lotus aura that emanated from her body after 3 bolts of lightning every day. Chapter 4802. Jun Juashang patted her hand and said with a faint smile, "You think too much. Not everyone can reach their level of strength, and not everyone can have the opportunity to ascend like them." Guan Shilin also smiled and said, "Yes. How many people in this world can reach the peak of the Supreme Being realm? Besides, although we are not weak, we are still far from the Supreme Being realm. Some people can't even touch the edge of the Supreme Being realm after cultivating for a lifetime. It's too early to talk about ascending." He smiled and looked at the clouds that were gathering in the sky. "Moreover, I'm fine now. I have a family, and I have Yi Jing and my child to accompany me. I'm already very satisfied. I don't think too much about other things." He had never been an ambitious person. He wanted to become strong only to protect the people who were important to him. With his current strength, he could be considered as the strongest among the strongest in the heaven realm. In addition to his relationship with Xiao Zhou, no one dared to attack them. Therefore, it could be said that everything they had now was what they wanted to have. Wanyan Qianhua and Jun Juashang couldn't help but look at each other when they heard this. For them, everything they had now was the life they wanted to have. It was peaceful and happy, and they had already obtained it. Everyone's pursuit was different. Some people wanted to be famous, some wanted to gain fame and fortune, some wanted to become strong for the sake of becoming strong, and some were forced to become strong by fate. There were also some like them, who only wanted to live an ordinary life with their loved ones, their children, and their families. Fengjiu and the others, even though they yearned for such a life, fate had always forced them to grow and become strong. Perhaps, only when they were strong enough to become the Supreme Being realm in the heaven and earth could they live the ordinary and warm life they wanted. In the depths of the sea, Xianyuan Mose, who was in a deep sleep, was crazily absorbing the aura of spiritual power. The aura of spiritual power was absorbed into his body and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The water at the bottom of the sea surged, but the surface of the sea was the same as before. Only the sea near where Fengjiu was surging due to the airflow fluctuations, rolling up layers of spray and slapping against the surface of the sea, producing the whistling sound of waves. Within the pillar of lightning, Fengjiu closed her eyes and gently raised her hands to form a seal in front of her. As her hands moved, the aura of the green lotus spread out and quickly repaired the marks left on her body by the heavenly lightning. Between her eyebrows, a green lotus appeared, emitting a green light. She was dressed in red and had black hair. Her body was enveloped in green light. Her face was beautiful and cold, and her expression was calm and steady. After using the power of the green lotus to repair the marks left on her body by the heavenly lightning, she gently turned her hands and placed them between her knees again. Her palms faced up as she sat quietly. From the beginning to the end, she didn't open her eyes. In the upper immortal realm, in Cloud Sky Mountain, and the other two watched the days pass by. They counted that the heavenly lightning struck 3 times a day, and now they had struck down 49 bolts. Up until now, they hadn't even seen their mother going through the tribulation in the lower immortal realm. Thus, they couldn't help but want to beg their master to let them see their mother. Chapter 4803. The 3 of them came to the soft bed under the tree to take a look. Seeing their master sleeping soundly, they couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. "Big brother, master seems to be asleep," whispered. Howler looked at their master and thought for a while. He also lowered his voice and said, "Then let's wait for master to wake up." Hearing this, Muchen looked at their master and his eyes flashed. In fact, he felt that their master might not necessarily be sleeping soundly. Perhaps, he already knew that they were coming and was just pretending to be asleep. Nodded and replied, "Okay, then we'll wait here for master to wake up." Seeing their master sleeping, it didn't seem good to wake him up. Even if they felt that their master might just be pretending to be asleep, they couldn't go up and disturb him like this. They could only wait obediently at the side. The 3 of them also didn't leave and stood by the soft bed to wait. As time passed little by little, their master didn't show any signs of waking up. They couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Yu's pair of beautiful eyes turned, and a crafty radiance flashed through her eyes. Her small face revealed a little fox-like smile, then she winked towards her 2 elder brothers, then lowering her voice, she said in a low voice, "Big brother, don't you feel that master is still very good?" And Muchen immediately understood what she meant and couldn't help but smile. However, this smile only appeared for a moment before it quickly disappeared. Then, Howler seriously looked at their master and whispered, "Yes, master is indeed very good-looking. In mother's words, he is a very handsome man. Although I think father is the most good-looking person in the world, master is also very good-looking. It's just that he's a little bit inferior to father." Muchen said solemnly as he stared intently at their master's face. Our father is the most good-looking person, but master is also very good-looking. Look at his eyebrows, aren't they the sword-like eyebrows mentioned in the books? And master's eyes, even though they're closed now, they'll still be like stars when they're open. And his nose, it's straight and tall, and it's also very good-looking. Yes, master's mouth is also very good-looking. There's even a slight horn at the corner of his mouth. Mother said that this is a lotus horn. A mouth with a lotus horn is very good-looking no matter if it's a man or a woman. And master's chin and the shape of his face. The 3 of them stared at Emperor Qing and sized him up with their 6 eyes. They even commented on him in a low voice. Even though Emperor Qing was very patient, he still couldn't stand the scorching eyes of the 3 little guys as they sized him up and commented on him. In the end, he finally opened his eyes. His gaze swept past Howler and Muchen before landing on Yu, who was chattering endlessly. His voice was deep and magnetic as well as somewhat lazy. "Are you done?" Yu automatically shut her mouth when he opened his eyes. At this time, hearing his question, she smiled and narrowed her eyes. With an innocent look, she softly called out, "Master, you're awake." Seeing that he didn't respond, Yu felt a little guilty. She smiled with a bit of fawning and said, "We were waiting for master to wake up just now. When we saw master's sleeping appearance, we realized that master's sleeping appearance is very good-looking." "Is that so?" Emperor Qing asked unhurriedly. Chapter 4804. Master, we want to see Mother. Master, please show us Mother. Yu said, blinking her beautiful big eyes at him. Hearing this, Emperor Qing glanced at them. Seeing the anticipation and pleading on their little faces, he paused for a moment and flicked his sleeve. A floating image appeared in front of them. In the image, their mother was sitting cross-legged there. Her body was suffused with a green aura, and a strong airflow was surging around her. Looking at that familiar face, the three children couldn't help but step forward and call out, "Mother!" However, they didn't get any response from her. Seeing that she was fine there, couldn't help but look at their master, as if wanting to get an answer from him that could reassure them. He asked, "Master, my mother has already experienced so many heavenly thunders. She will definitely be able to pass through the remaining heavenly thunders smoothly, right?" Emperor Qing looked at him and saw the worry and apprehension in his eyes. His gaze turned and fell on Fingzhou in the image. Seeing that her mental state was very good, he nodded and said, "If there are no accidents, she should have no problem with the remaining heavenly thunders." Hearing this, Hao lightly exhaled and revealed a big smile. "That's good. I knew that Mother would definitely be able to do it." When Mu Chen and Mu Yu heard this, they looked at each other and smiled happily. They watched there for a while. Perhaps because the three heavenly thunders had already fallen today, they only saw their mother recuperating there. Therefore, after a while, the image was flicked away by their master. "All right, go back and concentrate on your cultivation. Children shouldn't think too much about adult matters all day long." Emperor Qing gestured for the three of them to go back and cultivate. The three of them had already achieved their purpose of this trip. They saw that their mother was fine and heard from their master that their mother would successfully ascend. Only then did they feel relieved. The three of them respectfully bowed and left. In the city, Shen Shiqi and the other individual cultivators who had chased Yu to the city came again. However, they couldn't find the little fox-like girl they had met on the road. In the restaurant, they were sitting by the window, drinking wine and eating peanuts. One of the individual cultivators said, "Old Shin, it's been more than a year, and we haven't heard any news about that little girl. The people who sent out the information couldn't find her either. It seems that the little girl is either in the sect or deep in the mountains. Otherwise, with our power, it's impossible that we can't find any news about her." Yes. In this year, we have also secretly investigated almost all the aristocratic families, but there's no trace of that little girl. That little girl shouldn't be from here. But I'm curious. How do you think such a little girl avoided our tracking? Not to mention the fact that there's no trace of her in this city, there's no trace of her in the neighboring towns either. We've released the portrait, but there's no clue at all. She's really mysterious. Moreover, it's been more than a year, said another rogue cultivator. As soon as he finished speaking, he threw a peanut into his mouth. Chapter 4805. Besides, we already said that the little girl's face we saw back then was covered by a concealment technique. It's not strange that we couldn't find her. However, I believe that we will meet again one day. Only you would be interested in looking for a little girl for more than a year. The few of us are really loyal. We've been following you around for more than a year. I don't know what we're after. Another person said with a smile. He looked at Shen Shiqi and joked, "It's a pity that the little girl is a little young. Otherwise, she could be your wife." When the other two heard this, they immediately laughed out loud. Shen Shiqi smiled and said, "All right, don't make fun of me. Anyway, we have nothing to do, so we're just looking around. Or are you guys going back?" He looked at them and asked. "No, we're free outside. If we go back, we'll be restricted." However, last year, a great emperor ascended from the immortal realm. Did you guys hear the news? Do you know where he came from? How many years has it been since an expert ascended from the immortal realm? That expert ascended from the immortal realm. Everyone was shocked. How could we not hear about it? Besides, it's been a year. Naturally, everyone knows about the existence of this great emperor. As Shinshichi said this, he drank a mouthful of wine and ate a few peanuts. He said, "It said that this great emperor who ascended is called the Great Emperor. Some call him Saint Emperor for short. This person's immortal body was formed from an ancient golden lotus. When he ascended, his entire body was dazzling. I've heard about it too. However, it seems that no one knows the origin of this great emperor. After all, there are so many heavens between the immortal realm and the immortal realm. The immortal realm doesn't know about the immortal realm. The immortal realm also doesn't know about the immortal realm. It's really curious." Another person said. "You guys don't know." Another person lowered his voice and laughed. "I've heard some news. Do you guys know that in the immortal realm, there's a woman who's called the Ghost Dr. Fingzhou? Ghost Dr. Fingzhou. Why does this sound so familiar?" Another person said. "I've heard of this person. It's said that she's the Phoenix Star. Her medical and alchemy skills are unparalleled in the world. Her talent and strength are shocking. She's a genius that only appears once in 10,000 years." Shinshichi's eyes shone with admiration as he said, "I've heard my father mention her before. He said that Ghost Dr. Fengzhou was a deviant soul who came into this world. She was destined to be the Phoenix Star. There was also a prophecy about her. It said that she would become the ruler of the world. She would stand above all the immortals and become a supreme ruler." At this point, Shinshichi paused for a moment before continuing with a burning gaze. "Furthermore, it is precisely because of this that the 4 great emperors and a few other emperor lords joined forces to kill her. I heard from the elders in my family about the recent sky lightning tribulation. You're saying that the Ghost Dr. Fingzhou is the one who's going through the lightning tribulations 3 times a day?" Another person asked in surprise. It was obvious that he had only just found out. Shinshichi nodded and said, "That's right. Counting the days, she's already gone through 49 small lightning tribulations. As long as she's refined by the lightning tribulations, she'll be able to ascend and become an immortal. My family's elders said that this person has a high chance of successfully ascending. Also, if she succeeds, our world will change." Chapter 4806. Shinshichi gestured to them, and the other 3 came closer. He lowered his voice and said, "I'm only reminding you because it's you guys. You guys better send a message back to your families. I heard that the 4 great emperors are working together to deal with this Ghost Dr. Fingzhou. They want her dead. They're afraid that she'll come up and steal their power and territory. They're afraid that one day, Ghost Dr. Fingzhou will stand on top of their heads. Hence, they want her dead." Hearing this, the 3 of them were shocked. They looked at each other, and one of them asked, "Do you think that even if Ghost Dr. Fingzhou succeeds in ascending, with her strength alone, can she fight against the 4 great emperors?" Hee, that's why I said that you guys are not up to date with the news." Shinshichi laughed and looked at them. "This Ghost Dr. Fingzhou is not an ordinary person. Furthermore, there's another piece of news that you guys don't know. The great emperor who ascended a year ago has an extremely deep relationship with Ghost Dr. Fingzhou." Hearing this, the 3 of them were startled. They clearly didn't expect this. If she really ascends, will the 4 great emperors work together to suppress her? Or even let us, the aristocratic families, suppress that Ghost Dr. Fingzhou? This seems like... One of them frowned as he spoke. Shinshichi stepped back and leaned against the back of the chair. He said leisurely, "Just listen to me. There won't be any mistakes. If you don't understand something, just send the news back. The elders in your families will think about it. Seeing this, the three of them looked at each other and cupped their hands. Old Shin, thank you. We're all brothers. There's no need to thank me. He waved his hand and didn't mind. His gaze turned to the street outside. He wondered when he would meet that little girl again. The next time he met her, he would definitely ask her how she managed to hide from them. The days passed one by one. However, whether it was the lower immortal realm or the upper immortal realm, it seemed a little oppressive. Especially the aristocratic families and sects in the upper immortal realm, they felt a little peaceful recently. It was like the calm before the storm. The calm made people feel inexplicably uneasy and anxious. Today was the 27th day of Fengzhou's tempering by the thunder of soaring. It was also the last day. If she could successfully survive the 3 heavenly thunders today, then what awaited her was to be reborn into an immortal body and ascend to the 9 heavens. Today, the 3 heavenly thunders had yet to fall. However, the clouds in the sky were becoming more and more oppressive and terrifying. On the surface of the sea, the wind was blowing and the waves were roaring. The waves were swept up high by the wind and slammed against the surface of the sea fiercely, creating loud crashing sounds. In the Spirit Sea region of the East Sea, the various sovereigns were watching from afar. Luo Yu and the other captains of the Phoenix Guard, as well as Du Fan and Guan Shilin, were nervously looking at the red figure that was still sitting there quietly. After so many days of tribulation, the special red robe on her was already charred in some places and tattered in others. The color was no longer as bright as before. However, her expression remained the same. She was still as calm as ever. The green lotus between her eyebrows continued to provide her with an endless supply of green lotus chi. It was as if she could not sense what was happening outside. She was only focused on her ascension. Chapter 48:07. Their divine senses penetrated through the layers of clouds and locked onto the red figure below. Seeing that she had held on until now, the 4 of them had ugly expressions. I didn't expect Fengzhou to have such heaven-defying luck. It's already the last day, and only the last heavenly lightning is left, one of the great emperors said with a heavy heart. Since that's the case, let's do what we agreed on previously. I don't believe that she can really withstand a sure-kill attack from the 4 of us, one of the great emperors said with a gloomy gaze as he stared below. Increase the power of the first 2 heavenly lightning bolts. If she can withstand it, the 4 of us will join forces to strike the last heavenly lightning. All right. Immediately, the 4 of them looked at each other. 2 of them mobilized the powerful pressure in their bodies and prepared to increase the power of the heavenly lightning that was about to descend. At the same time, at Cloud Sky Mountain, Emperor Qing and the 3 children were watching the scene in the floating mirror under a tree. They were watching Fengzhou undergo the heavenly lightning refinement on the last day. The 3 children were nervous. Even Yu, who was usually the most talkative, was holding her breath. She didn't even dare to breathe loudly, let alone speak. Emperor Qing glanced at the 3 children and then looked at Fengzhou in the mirror. Then, he shifted his gaze and looked at the sky. He felt that those people wouldn't let Fengzhou off so easily, especially when Fengzhou was undergoing the last 3 heavenly lightning refinement. Those people couldn't just watch and not do anything. He paused for a moment and got up from the soft couch. With his hands behind his back, he leisurely walked away. Hao, who had been staring at the scene, sensed it and looked up. He saw their master leisurely walking on the wind with his hands behind his back. In a few seconds, he was heading towards the peak of the mountain. He couldn't help but wonder what his master was going to do. As the peak of Cloud Sky Mountain was shrouded in clouds and mist, it was very difficult to see the scenery at the peak of the mountain even from within Cloud Sky Mountain. Therefore, when he saw their master heading towards the peak of the mountain, Howler pondered for a while. Since his master didn't say anything and didn't say much, he didn't ask and wasn't curious. Because what he wanted to see was his mother successfully ascending. At this moment, no matter who called him, he didn't want to leave this scene. Mu Chen and Mu Yu didn't notice their master's departure. Or rather, they knew it, but they didn't care. At this moment, no one was more important than their mother, even if that person was their master. When they reached the peak of Cloud Sky Mountain, the Lotus Emperor clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the distant sky while facing the wind. After a while, he retracted his gaze and sat down cross-legged on a smooth rock. Feng Jiu closed her eyes, but at this moment, she felt the oppressive and powerful airflow above her head. The powerful pressure and airflow made her feel the aura of death and murderous intent. She felt two strands of murderous intent from the powerful pressure and airflow. Almost in an instant, her mind was clear. Obviously, it was those people who wanted to take her life. But did they really think it was that easy to take her life? The corners of her lips curled up slightly, revealing a faint arc. Chapter 4808. She only felt the lightning and heavenly thunder strike her body at the same time. The powerful impact was like a torrent of water from high above, hitting her body heavily. At that moment, she felt a wave of pain and numbness coursing through her veins. The tempering of the heavenly thunder caused her skin, flesh, tendons, and bones to suffer an extremely powerful impact and pain at that moment. She clenched her teeth tightly and clenched her hands into fists. She forced herself to endure the excruciating pain, as if her bones and tendons were being broken and then crushed. Cold sweat seeped out of her forehead and beads of sweat rolled down her cheeks. However, in the next moment, they were blown away by the airflow from her body. Guan Shilin and the others, who were watching from a place where the pressure and airflow could not reach, saw that this heavenly thunder was even more powerful than the previous one. They could not help but feel their hearts skip a beat. When they saw her forcing herself to endure with a painful expression, they became even more anxious. In an immortal mansion in the upper immortal realm, Mo Chin sat cross-legged and released his divine sense. He knew that those people would definitely make things difficult for Fengzhou and obstruct her ascension. Therefore, he stood guard here quietly. If Fengzhou really could not hold on in the end, he would be able to lend a hand. Moreover, he believed that with Fengzhou's strength, she would definitely be able to ascend smoothly. All he needed to do was to stand guard. Unexpectedly, about half an incense stick of time after the first bolt of lightning struck down, the second bolt of lightning struck down immediately after. The loud rumbling sound shook the heaven realm, and the sound of thunder rumbled and reverberated in the sky. Fengzhou's previous heavenly thunderstrikes were separated by a certain amount of time. This gave her time to recuperate and adapt. Now that the first heavenly thunder had just struck, the second one followed closely behind. It was obvious how much those people wanted to kill her. The four great emperors in the sky saw that Fengzhou in the lower realm had actually withstood two heavenly thunders. For a moment, their faces darkened. I didn't expect her to be able to hold on. A great emperor said hatefully. He was a little angry. This Fengzhou is indeed extraordinary. She's so strong and powerful. No matter what we do, we can't let her ascend successfully. Now that two of the last three heavenly thunders have fallen, it seems that she can withstand them. Then, we only have one chance left. Another great emperor said in a gloomy and ruthless voice. No, look, she's vomiting blood. A great emperor who had been staring at Fengzhou exclaimed softly. His voice was filled with unconcealable joy and excitement. When the other three heard this, they looked down again. Indeed, they saw Fingzhou spit out a mouthful of blood with a piyut sound. The corner of his mouth was stained with a trace of blood, and his face was pale. Ha 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 ha. Looks like our attacks are still effective. She shouldn't be able to hold on much longer. A great emperor raised his head and laughed loudly. His face was filled with excitement. Fingzhou vomited blood. This proved that Fingzhou could no longer withstand the power of the two heavenly thunders. Even if she was still holding on, she had withstood the first two heavenly thunders. There was no way she could withstand the third one and ascend to immortality. Chapter 4809. Let's send her on her way. It's best if her soul scatters and dissipates between heaven and earth. She will never enter the cycle of reincarnation. One of the great emperors narrowed his eyes and said. A ruthless glint flashed across his eyes. All right. The four of us will join forces and give her a fatal blow. As the other three spoke, they looked at each other and revealed a grim smile. Just as the four great emperors were preparing for the final blow, on Cloud Sky Mountain, the three children saw their mother vomiting blood and her face turning pale. They couldn't help but become anxious. What should we do? Mother vomited blood. Will she be all right? Yu-Er's eyes were red from worry. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she forced them back down. Mother will be fine. She will definitely be fine. Mu Chen said firmly. His little face was tense as he looked nervously at the scene in front of him. Mother. Hao-Er called out softly. His voice was choked with sobs and his heart was thumping wildly. No one knew that his body was trembling because of fear and worry. At the peak of Cloud Sky Mountain, Emperor Qing was also paying attention to Fingzhou's situation below. When he saw her vomiting blood, he frowned slightly. However, he still closed his eyes and sat there quietly. Perhaps, in his opinion, since Fengzhou could withstand the first 3 bolts of heavenly thunder, she should also be able to withstand the last 3 bolts of heavenly thunder. What's more, she herself was an alchemist, so perhaps she had refined some kind of divine pill in reserve. It was impossible for her to vomit blood just because of these 2 bolts of heavenly thunder. However, judging from the current situation, it would appear that he was indeed injured. If he was injured, the situation would become very dangerous in the final bolt of heavenly lightning. At the same time, at the Spirit Sea realm, Guan Shilin and the others were also shocked when they saw Fingzhou vomit blood. She vomited blood. What should we do? There's still the last bolt of lightning. Will she be able to withstand it? Guan Shilin said anxiously. Wanyan Qianhua looked at Fingzhou in front of him and took a deep breath. He looked at Jun Jueshang beside him and asked, "What do you think?" Jun Jueshang pursed his lips and looked at Fingzhou in front of him with a grave expression. He said, "I'm afraid that her heart and 5 internal organs will be injured. If that happens, I'm afraid that she won't be able to withstand the last bolt of lightning. Based on her situation, the consequence of failure is very likely." Hearing this, Wanyan Qianhua immediately said, "Let's find a way to save her. We can't just watch her die in front of us." As soon as she finished speaking, she wanted to take a step forward. Wait. Du Fan and Leng Hua spoke at the same time. They walked over and looked at Wanyan Qianhua and the others. They said, "Master told us not to disturb her when she's breaking through. We can only observe and not get close. It's useless no matter who gets close to her. Not only can we not save her, but it's also very likely that we'll be accidentally injured by the lightning." Wanyan Qianhua's face darkened when he heard this. He said, "But she's vomiting blood now. Do you know what will happen if she fails?" Du Fan and Leng Hua looked at each other and nodded. They said, "Of course we know." However, we're here to protect her under Master's orders. Moreover, we believe in Master. Chapter 48:10. Seeing this, Zheng Shang held Wanyan Qianhua's hand and said, "Believe in Fingzhou. She never does anything she's not sure of. Besides, Du Fan and the others are right. She has withstood so many bolts of lightning, so there's no reason for her not to be able to withstand the last one. Believe in her." Hearing this, Wanyan Qianhua nodded and didn't say anything else. She just leaned into Zheng Shang's arms and didn't dare to look at the scene where the last bolt of lightning was about to strike. Hearing this, Guan Shilin was also silent for a while. He didn't say anything, but his hands were tightly clenched into fists and his palms were sweaty. "Look, the wind and waves on the sea are a little unusual." Ling Shuang looked at the sea. Because of his master's ascension tribulation, the sea was a little different from usual, and the waves would be bigger. However, it was rare to see a wave that was 7 or 8 meters high. Because of her words, they looked at the surface of the sea. Indeed, they saw a wave surging on the surface of the sea. Accompanied by the whistling of the sea wind, it surged violently towards the shore. The momentum was so terrifying that it caused their expressions to become serious. If the wave hit them, Fingzhou, who was sitting on the rock, would be affected as well. However, just as this thought flashed through their minds, they saw a loud crack in the sky. A bolt of lightning struck down, and at the same time, a destructive bolt of lightning struck down towards Fingzhou. No one noticed that Fingzhou, who was surrounded by lightning, threw a pill into her mouth when the dazzling bolt of lightning flashed across the sky. At the same time, she turned her hand and an ancient mirror appeared in her palm. The momentum and pressure of the lightning and thunder struck down on Fingzhou's body. At that moment, there seemed to be 4 different auras faintly appearing between the lightning and the lightning. The 4 different auras transformed into the shape of dragons, which roared and rushed towards Fingzhou. The destructive aura of death also struck down at that moment. Boom! It was a loud bang that shook the 9 heavens. The whole world seemed to be trembling, and the land of the East Sea spiritual region was shaking. Some of the ground even cracked because it couldn't withstand the terrifying pressure. When the lightning and thunder mixed with the 4 destructive auras struck down on Fingzhou's body, a strong and dazzling light burst out from her body like the sun. There seemed to be a faint cracking sound, like the sound of a mirror shattering. "Master! Xiao Zhou!" Everyone couldn't help but cry out in alarm. The destructive aura of death was too powerful, and the dazzling light was too dazzling. As a result, the place where she stood was filled with dazzling light. No one could see her at all. "Mother! Mother! Mother!" On Cloud Sky Mountain, the 3 children shouted with red eyes. 3 pairs of eyes stared intently at the image. However, in the next moment, the image that they were staring at seemed to have been disturbed by something and disappeared before their eyes. "Mother! Boo-hoo! Big brother, I can't see mother, I can't see mother." Chapter 48:11. Hao and Mu Chen were also anxious. Their eyes turned red when they saw the disappearing image. Why did it disappear? Why can't we see it? "Master, Master!" The 2 of them hurriedly shouted. Their voices, which carried the aura of spiritual power, spread throughout the entire Cloud Sky Mountain with anxiety and panic. The Qing Emperor, who was in the clouds of Cloud Sky Mountain, heard their voices and knew why they were so anxious. However, he was also very surprised. At this moment, he could not see Fingzhou's situation and could not divert his attention to respond to his 3 disciples at this moment. He focused his mind and used his divine sense to explore the immortal realm again. However, he was shocked and quickly retracted his divine sense. In the East Sea's spiritual region, in the dazzling light of the sun, for powerful airflows and pressure visible to the naked eye were refracted from the light and attacked the 9 heavens above. They were so fast and powerful that they were as terrifying as the 4 destructive auras that struck Fengjiu. In the sky above the celestial realm, the 4 emperors were looking down to see if Fengjiu had been annihilated. Unexpectedly, in the next moment, a torrential stream of air suddenly attacked the 4 of them. Because the 4 auras were familiar to them, they were unable to react or dodge in time. Just like that, they were sent flying by the 4 streams of air. Whoosh! Bang! The 4 powerful airflows cut through the air and landed on the 4 great emperors. Even though the 4 of them were powerful, they were still sent flying. The moment they spat out blood, their figures flew hundreds of meters away. After spinning a few times in the air, they fell down. Ah! Screams and exclamations came from the 4 of them. However, the 4 of them fell down from the clouds due to the heavy impact and disappeared in a short while. The only thing that could be seen was that the 4 of them seemed to be seriously injured. The Qing Emperor of Cloud Sky Mountain saw this scene. Mo Chen, who was in the immortal abode, also saw this scene. After being stunned for a moment, the 2 of them smiled. The former was surprised and expectant, while the latter was relieved and relieved. At the same time, in the Spirit Sea region, the dark clouds that shrouded the entire sky dispersed under the dazzling light. The aura of death and destruction in the air, as well as the powerful airflow and pressure, all disappeared without a trace as the light gradually dispersed. Even the 7 or 8 meter high waves on the sea disappeared in an instant, only splashing a layer of water. The oppressive aura dispersed and what appeared was the moving celestial music that came from the blue sky and the immortal light path that shone down from the 9 heavens. The 7-colored rainbow stretched across the sea and extended to the large rock that Fengjiu was on. The immortal light appeared. She slowly opened her eyes. Her clear eyes shined brightly as she looked at the celestial path that had appeared in the sky. She stood up against the wind. Chapter 48:12. Master. Xiao Jiu. Ah Jiu. Du Fan, Guan Shilin, and the rest looked at this scene with tears of excitement in their eyes. They shouted loudly and waved at Fengjiu, who was standing against the wind. After more than 20 days of anxiety, they could finally put down their worries at this moment. At this moment, there was only excitement and joy in everyone's hearts. She had finally made it through. She was finally going to ascend to the 9 heavens. From the moment the last bolt of lightning struck, she possessed a body of celestial bones and an unparalleled lifespan that was as long as the heavens and the earth. Looking at the red figure who was standing against the wind and shrouded in holy light and heavenly music, everyone's eyes were filled with pride. That was their master, that was their family. After hearing their voices, Fengjiu slowly turned around. Her red dress drew a beautiful arc as she turned around. After she turned around, the red dress also fluttered in the wind, creating a circle of enchanting petals. Amidst the holy light, her figure gradually flew up and her feet left the ground. She stood there quietly. When her quiet gaze fell on the familiar faces, there was a trace of gentleness in it. A beautiful smile bloomed on her peerless face. Take care of my family for me. I'm leaving, but I'll be back. Her voice came from the sky. Her voice was soft, but it contained a firm conviction and clearly entered everyone's ears. Don't worry, Master. Your subordinates will definitely not disappoint Master's trust. Du Fan and the rest said in unison. They cupped their fists and bowed, kneeling on one knee. Each of them raised their heads and watched as their master gradually disappeared into the distance. Audio. We'll wait for you to come back. You have to take care of yourself. You must be well. Wanyan Qianhua shouted loudly and waved at Fengzhou. Xiao Zhou, you have to take care of yourself. You have us at home, don't worry. Guan Shilin also shouted loudly and waved at her. He watched as her figure gradually moved towards the rainbow bridge in the holy light until she reached the 7-colored clouds in the sky. When the heavenly music in the sky gradually dissipated, the heavenly aura in the air gradually dissipated, and the holy light gradually disappeared. The 7-colored path in the sky also disappeared without a trace, along with the dazzling red figure. Seeing her ascend, Wanyan Qianhua, Guan Shilin, and the rest retracted their gazes and looked at each other. Guan Shilin grinned and said in a clear voice, I'm going back to the Feng family's mansion to tell grandfather and the others this good news. They'll be very happy to hear this news. Hearing this, we'll go back with you to see them. Speaking, I haven't seen them for a long time. Now, there's no need to worry about her. Now that Xiao has successfully ascending, there's nothing to worry about her. We'll go back with you. Okay. Guan Shilin responded and looked at Du Fan and the others. He wondered what arrangements Xiao Zhou made for them before she left. Du Fan and the others had already stood up. Hearing their words, Du Fan and the others discussed for a while before walking over. Chapter 48:13. Seeing this, Guan Shilin nodded and said, well, you don't have to worry about the old residents. Just do as Xiao Zhou told you before he ascended. We know. They said, and then cupped their hands to Guan Shilin, Wanyan Qianhua, and Jun Ju Shang. Please send our greetings and congratulations to Old Master and the others. If there is anything that needs to be solved, just send us a message and we will deal with it. Ha ha ha, congratulations. The sovereigns who had been watching Fengzhou's ascension walked over with smiles on their faces and cupped their hands to congratulate them. The South Qing sovereign's face was full of smiles, and his tone was kind and amiable. He said to Guan Shilin and the others, the ghost doctor has finally ascended. This is really a joyous occasion. We were lucky enough to see the ghost doctor's ascension, and we are even more shocked and excited. After a few days, we will definitely bring congratulatory gifts and visit Old Master and the others at the Feng family's old residence. Guan Shilin cupped his hands and returned the greeting. He smiled and said, okay, I will definitely report to my adoptive father and the others when I return. We will wait for your arrival. After exchanging a few pleasantries, the sovereigns left first. Guan Shilin, Du Fan, and the others arranged for the Phoenix Guards to guard the sea area and then went to the spaceship. At the same time, in Cloud Sky Mountain, Qing Emperor was walking on the wind with his hands clasped behind his back. When he saw Hao, and Mu Chen who were so anxious that their eyes were red, as well as Yu, who was crying due to worry, the corners of his mouth curled up and he smiled. Why are you crying? Your mother's ascension is a joyous occasion, isn't it? Hearing his voice and seeing him come back, the 3 children hurriedly ran toward him. Master! Yu-er's eyes were still tearing, and she was crying very sadly. When she saw him, she threw herself at him and cried loudly, Master, my mother can't see her, we can't see her, woo-woo. Master, our mother. Hao and Mu Chen also surrounded him, looking at him anxiously and worriedly. But before they could finish, he interrupted them. All right, there's no need to say any more. There's no need to cry. Your mother is fine and has successfully ascended. Seeing their worried and anxious expressions, and seeing his little disciple crying so much, he raised his hand and waved it. The image that had disappeared reappeared in front of them. Ah! It's mother. Yu hastily wiped her tears, fearing that tears would cloud her eyes and make her unable to see her mother's appearance. Mother has successfully ascended. Hao and Mu Chen said at the same time. Their faces were full of surprise and excitement. Especially when they saw their mother slowly ascending, they were even more excited. It's really mother. Little sister, quickly look. Muchin pulled Yuper's hand, and his little face was filled with joy. Mother, mother! Yu shouted and tiptoed, wanting to get closer to her mother. The Qing emperor looked at Fengzhou in the image, then glanced at his 3 disciples and said, "She has successfully ascended. Can you be relieved this time?" Not only did Fengzhou successfully ascend, but he also used some kind of treasure to seriously injure the 4 great emperors. Even he didn't dare to release his divine sense to investigate at that moment, which was enough to show how powerful that treasure was. Chapter 48:14. It's fine as long as mother is fine. How smiled. Because of this smile, his little face looked a lot more lively. He had the vitality and happiness that people of his age should have. Shifu, can we go see mother? Muchin asked, looking at their Shifu. Master, take us to see mother. We miss mother so much. Yu also said, pulling on their master's sleeve. Emperor Qin glanced at them and said, "Have you forgotten what I told you? Even if your mother ascends, you can't go see her, and you can't let others know about your relationship with her. Otherwise, if her enemies can't do anything to her, they will think of ways to do something to you and use you to threaten her." When he saw their disappointed expressions, he clasped his hands behind his back and sighed softly. Master is doing this for your own good. You'd better focus on your cultivation. With that, he flicked his sleeve and erased the image. Ah! Master! Yu cried out in alarm when she saw that the image of their mother was wiped away by her master. She looked up at him with a red face. Emperor Qing turned around and walked back to his cave. He said indifferently, "Go back and cultivate. It's fine as long as you know that your mother is fine. As for the rest, it's not something you can worry about right now." Knowing that their master always meant what he said, the 3 of them didn't ask for any more help. They could only walk back with a lonely expression. At Imo Chen's immortal mansion, after seeing that Fengzhou had successfully ascended, he didn't pay any more attention to it. No matter what, now that she had successfully ascended, he didn't need to worry about other things. Fengzhou ascended. Somewhere in the immortal realm, celestial music reverberated in the sky. A celestial island appeared, and a majestic palace was completed amidst the light. Her immortal mansion was also the same as Imo Chen's immortal mansion a year ago. Only the palace and environment were slightly different. However, it was still in the same immortal mansion. Hundreds of flowers bloomed on the island, hundreds of fruits grew on the branches, red-crowned cranes flew, and magpies sang happily. A 7-colored rainbow bridge spanned across the immortal island, adding a dazzling scenery to this fairyland-like island where hundreds of flowers were blooming. However, compared to Imo Chen's immortal abode, which was bustling with activity when the monarchs came to present gifts, Fengzhou's immortal abode was cold and cheerless. Not a single person came to congratulate or present gifts. What she didn't know was that the sovereigns under her jurisdiction had long heard of the enmity between the 4 great emperors and her, and that they wanted to kill her. Therefore, even though she had become a great emperor in this world, those sovereigns didn't dare to visit her, for fear that they would offend the other 4 great emperors if they congratulated this newly ascended great emperor. Compared to this, Fengzhou didn't care much. At this time, her figure landed on the rainbow bridge and stood on it, looking at the private island that belonged to her. It could only be said that this was an island that stretched as far as the eye could see. In addition to her newly built immortal residence, there were several mountains that reached into the clouds behind the palace, layer upon layer, and a forest that seemed to have no end. Chapter 48:15. It's as beautiful as a fairyland. This must be the place they're talking about, right? She murmured softly. She was in a very good mood. After going through so many difficulties, she had finally successfully ascended to immortality. At this moment, she was naturally overjoyed. In this place, on this island that was as beautiful as a fairyland, how she wished that her husband and her children could be by her side at this moment. They could share her joy and share this fairyland. Mose, if only you were here too, how great would that be? She said softly. A trace of regret flashed across her heart. But it doesn't matter. I came here first, so I'll take care of this place first. This place will be our home in the future. It will be a place where our family can reunite. A determined light flashed across her eyes. Her clear eyes looked at this fairyland, and a sincere smile appeared on her face. In the next moment, she waved her sleeves and several rays of light flew out. Some rose into the air and circled in the sky, while others leaped and landed steadily on the ground. Master! 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 Joyful and excited voices rang out from Fengjiu's contracted beasts. When the fire phoenix rose into the air, it revealed its true form with a flash of light. The huge figure of the fire phoenix soared in the sky. Its flaming wings flapped, and it raised its head. A phoenix cry reverberated in the sky. It penetrated deep into the clouds and reverberated in the sky, reaching every corner of the island below. In that instant, in the endless forest, when the beasts heard the phoenix cry from the ancient mythical beast, they all lowered their bodies and knelt down. Their mouths emitted cries, and they didn't even dare to raise their heads. At this moment, due to the appearance of the fire phoenix, the beasts in the forest clearly knew that such a powerful ancient divine beast was guarding this island. When Tun Yun, Lao Bai, and the other contracted beasts saw the fire phoenix hovering in the sky and raising its head to chirp, they knew what it was trying to do. Therefore, they only glanced at it in the sky before looking around happily. They jumped up and scurried around the area, then returned to the bottom of the Rainbow Bridge to congratulate their master. Fengjiu stood on the Rainbow Immortal Bridge, facing the wind. She looked into the distance with a faint smile on her lips. She watched as the immortal crane transformed into an immortal servant, as well as the flower immortal and the others transformed from the flowers. They leisurely walked over behind Old White and the other contracted beasts. When they reached the bottom of the Rainbow Immortal Bridge, they bowed respectfully. Congratulations to the Phoenix Master for ascending and becoming an immortal. Gentle voices of congratulations sounded from their mouths, and they were nothing more than some auspicious words of congratulations for her ascension. Fengjiu raised his hand and some medicinal pills flew into their hands. He said slowly, "All right, you guys can leave first. Go and prepare a place to rest. Also, I need some information. You guys are responsible for finding out for me." Her gaze landed on the 4 immortal servants transformed from the cranes. When the 4 immortal servants heard her words, they didn't hesitate and respectfully replied, "Yes, we will follow the Phoenix Master's orders." Chapter 48:16. The fire phoenix flapped her wings and brought Fengjiu to circle above the immortal island, checking the area they occupied and the boundaries they had set up. The 4 great emperors who had been injured by the counterattack had already returned to their respective immortal mansions. Once they returned, they immediately went into seclusion to cultivate. They only instructed their subordinates to be on high alert in case someone attacked them. After one of the great emperors entered his mansion and closed the door, the blood in his chest could no longer be suppressed and spurted out. He staggered backward, holding on to the table and chair as he came to his bed. He leaned against the headboard and gasped for breath. His face was pale as he leaned against the headboard. He took out a pill from his space and swallowed it. After resting for a while, he sat cross-legged to heal his injuries. It was not until 2 days later that he opened his eyes. Fengzhou. How could he injure me to this extent? He said hatefully, but in his heart, he also knew that the powerful air current that had injured him was actually the air current that they had used to attack Fengzhou. However, for some reason, their attack had been reflected back at them, causing them to be seriously injured. What kind of treasure is that? How could it reflect their attacks? He muttered. He couldn't understand. How could there be such a powerful treasure in the lower immortal realm? And it had been obtained by Fengzhou. Thinking of the other 3 who had also suffered from the same backlash, he thought for a while, then got up and walked out of the room. Right now, he was afraid that he could not go into seclusion to regulate his breathing and heal his injuries. This attack had injured them too severely. Even if they had taken medicinal pills to recuperate for 2 days, they could only get out of bed and walk around. If they were to really use their qi to attack, it was impossible for them to do so in their current physical condition. Especially when he had just checked that he only had 30% of his strength left. If Fengzhou were to attack him at this time, he would definitely die. Therefore, while Fengzhou had just ascended, he had to do something to obstruct her so that she would not have the chance to seek revenge. Therefore, after leaving the room, he ordered someone to send a message to the immortal monarchs, immortal elders, and monarchs in the area under his control, asking them to deal with the newly ascended Great Emperor. At the same time, he personally sent a message to the other 3 Great Emperors, informing them of his plans. At the same time, he also asked them to make preparations to unite the sovereigns and immortal monarchs under his jurisdiction to launch a crusade against Fengzhou. After all, with the strength of the sovereigns, it was impossible to deal with the newly ascended Great Emperor Fengzhou. If they were asked to deal with him, it was very likely that they would retreat because they had to fight. Therefore, he planned to let the sovereigns and the various sects and clans under the jurisdiction of the 4 great emperors work together to cut off the resources in the area under Fengzhou's jurisdiction. Almost as soon as he gave the order, the sovereigns anxiously called for a meeting to discuss this matter. At the same time, Mo Qin, who had received the news from the sovereign below, only smiled and told them not to get involved in this matter. After instructing the Immortal Mansion's immortal maidservant to guard the Immortal Mansion, he flicked his sleeves and flew out of the Immortal Island alone into the clouds. Chapter 48:17. If it was in the past, it would take at least 2 days to travel from the Immortal Island he belonged to the Immortal Island on the other side of the sky. After becoming the great emperors of this world, they had many immortal bodies, and one of them was called shrinking Earth into inches. It took him half a day to arrive at Fengzhou's floating island in the sky. He stood in the clouds and looked at the Immortal Island in front of him, which was covered in clouds. He could faintly see the corner of the magnificent palace and the faintly discernible mountain peak. He walked closer to take a look. As expected, there was a barrier around the Immortal Island. He smiled faintly and went around to the main entrance. When he arrived at the entrance, he called out, "Ah, Joe, it's me." His voice was slow and gentle, but it contained a strong aura of spiritual power. It clearly passed through the clouds and the barrier and entered Fengzhou's ears. Hearing Mo Chen's voice, Fengzhou's eyes lit up. She immediately got up and walked outside. Because it was Mo Chen, she personally went to the entrance and opened the barrier to invite him in. "Mo Chen, why are you here?" Fengzhou looked at him, who was dressed in white and looked like an immortal, and asked with a smile. Mo Chen walked in and followed her for a while. Only then did she get a good look at the interior of the building. With a gentle smile on his face, he said softly, "I should have come to congratulate you 2 days ago when you ascended. However, I thought that since you just ascended, there would be many people congratulating you, so I postponed it for 2 days. As he spoke, he paused and looked at her, saying, I see that your place is even bigger than my immortal island, and the environment is very charming. His gaze fell on the rainbow bridge that spanned the entire immortal island not far away, and a trace of surprise flashed across his eyes. That rainbow bridge didn't disappear. Hearing his words, Fengzhou chuckled and said, That rainbow bridge won't disappear. It can be walked on. It appeared after you ascended. As she spoke, she strolled with him and said, Since the completion of my immortal abode, you are the only guest who has come. I really haven't seen anyone else. Oh. Mo Chen raised his eyebrows and looked at her. Do you know the reason? Yes, it's the doing of the 4 great emperors. She said slowly, looking at the road ahead. Walking slowly, she said carelessly, the 4 great emperors joined forces to deal with me. They even reached their hands into my territory and threatened the sovereigns and sects under my jurisdiction. They are probably afraid of the 4 great emperors. After all, they are authoritative figures in the upper immortal realm. How much do they know about a newly ascended great emperor like me? Mo Chen smiled when she heard this, and she said, I figured that since you've just ascended into the immortal realm, you wouldn't know much about the exalted immortal realm. So, besides bringing you news, I've also come to tell you the information I've gathered over the past year. The 2 of them walked to a pavilion and sat down. 2 immortal servants served tea and left, quietly waiting at a place far away. What news did you bring me? Fengzhou asked as she took a sip of tea. I've received news that the 4 great emperors have given the order to cut off the supply of resources to the area under your jurisdiction. They will probably use other methods to suppress and deal with you in the future. As Mo Chen spoke, she picked up the tea in front of her and took a sip. Chapter 48:18. Mo Chen smiled when he saw that she was not worried at all. Aren't you worried? Worried? What's there to be worried about? Fengzhou replied casually as she played with the teacup in her hand. Currently, none of my subordinates have come looking for me. Naturally, I haven't received any news about this. I'm not in a hurry. Let's wait until they can't hold it in any longer and come looking for me. Furthermore, since they don't respect me, I naturally have to teach them a lesson, don't I? Mo Chen shook his head and chuckled when he heard this. This was indeed her character. Since she was not worried, she would naturally have a solution. Therefore, he did not continue on this topic. Instead, he asked, How are you going to deal with the 4 sovereigns? Fengzhou played with the teacup as the corners of her lips curled up into a smile. However, her eyes were cold and there was even a cold glint in them. The 4 of them have suffered heavy injuries. It's impossible for them to recover in a short period of time. Now that I've just ascended, I'm not familiar with this world yet. Therefore, I'll let them live for a few more days. Sooner or later, I'll settle this score with the 4 of them. Now that the 4 of them had been injured by their own strength, they would definitely go into closed-door cultivation because they were worried that she would come looking for them. Even if she went looking for them, they might not necessarily be hiding in their immortal abodes. Therefore, it was better to put this matter aside and deal with the matter at hand first. Furthermore, she needed to understand what kind of existence the forces in the upper immortal realm were. It's right that you didn't make a sudden move. The 4 great emperors have existed for too long. Their forces are definitely not as simple as they appear on the surface. Furthermore, some of the other great emperors have friendly relations with them. Furthermore, even if you went looking for them, I'm afraid they wouldn't be in their immortal abodes. Mo Chen glanced at her as he spoke. He then took out some information from the space and handed it to her. This is some information that I've collected over the past year. Before we ascended, there were already 10 great emperors on this list. However, some of them are in seclusion and don't appear easily. Therefore, the information we can get is limited. Fengzhou took the information and flipped through it. She smiled and said, "Thank you. This information is very useful to me." Mo Chen smiled and said, "The 4 great emperors who want to deal with you are full of ambition. According to what I know, they're afraid of the prophecy about you becoming the Lord of the heavens and earth, so they want to deal with you. As for the others, they've been in seclusion for many years." Hearing his words, Feng Jiuqiu didn't mind at first. Instead, she flipped through the information in the book. However, when she heard that he had taken in 3 disciples, her hand that was flipping through the information stopped. She raised her head and looked at Mo Chen, waiting for him to finish speaking. After he finished, she couldn't help but smile and said, "Now that you mention it, I know who you're talking about." Chapter 48:19. Fengzhou chuckled and said, "Yes, I know him. I even know his 3 disciples." Looking at her expression and the smile on her face, a thought flashed across his mind. He said in surprise, "Could it be her 3 children?" Fengzhou nodded and smiled. "It's a long story, but it's definitely them." Seeing this, Mo Chen smiled. "I know." How perceptive was he? As long as she said it, he would naturally be able to guess. He just did not know how she knew the Qing Emperor. How did the 3 children become the Qing Emperor's disciples? "That's right, I have something to ask you," Mo Chen said. "What is it?" Fengzhou looked at him and asked. "On the day of your immortal ascension, where did the treasure that injured the 4 great emperors come from? What kind of treasure is it? How could it be so powerful? After all, they were so far away. Moreover, what kind of people were the 4 great emperors? To think that such a person could be injured, and in such an unguarded situation at that." Fengzhou did not expect him to ask about this. After being stunned for a moment, she chuckled, "It's a mirror. However, it's not an ordinary mirror. Many years ago, when I was dot, she told him in detail about how the monkey lured her to the cave and how she obtained the mirror that could open a passage to another world." After hearing her words, Mo Chen was slightly surprised. "You obtained it like that? I didn't expect it to be such an incredible treasure. I'm afraid it's not an ordinary item. Actually, I didn't expect it to be so effective either. Unfortunately, the mirror shattered after reflecting the 4 great emperors' attacks. When I ascended, I saw that it had already been shattered into pieces," she said with some pity. "Fortunately, you had that treasure with you back then. Otherwise, you might not have been able to endure the attacks of the 4 great emperors." Mo Chen shook her head and said slowly, "I can only say that all of this was predestined. Now that I've successfully ascended, but Mo-ze." She sighed softly. Thinking about Mo-ze, who was still in the spirit sea of the East Sea, her heart felt heavy. She did not know when he would wake up. Who knew when he would ascend? She could only hope that the power of the green lotus she had given him at that time would be of help to him. Hearing her mention Mo-ze, Mo Chen was reminded of his master. Therefore, his expression softened as he said, "Don't worry. Heaven helps the worthy. What's more, my master risked his life to give him a chance to live, so he won't die so easily. It's only a matter of time before he wakes up and ascends. One day, he will come here to reunite with you." "Yes," Fengzhou replied, then looked at Mo Chen and said, "I'm sorry. Because of Mo-ze, your master lost his life." Mo Chen shook his head and said, "Everything is fated. Moreover, my master has already seen through life and death. Every decision he makes must have his reasons." Actually, there was one more thing that he did not tell her. Because his master had revealed too many secrets of heaven, his lifespan had been reduced, and he was fated to face this calamity. He could not blame anyone for this. The two of them chatted in the pavilion. Chen told Fingzhou about the immortal realm in detail, helping her understand everything about the immortal realm in the shortest time possible. At the bottom of the spirit sea of the East Sea, an endless stream of spiritual energy was madly surging into the boundary. Everything was absorbed into the body of the sleeping Xinyuan Mo's. Chapter 48-20. Guo and Wei Feng were guarding the eastern sea. When they saw the storm on the surface of the sea sweep up, they couldn't help but exchange glances with each other, and then they raised their energy and flew out of the flying ship to arrive on the surface of the sea to take a look. The aura of spirit energy is surging violently at the bottom of the sea. Could it be that the Yama Lord? Wei Feng looked at Guo with a trace of surprise on his face. His divine sense spread out and noticed that the spirit energy at the bottom of the sea was surging violently towards a certain place, yet he was unable to detect where the Yama Lord was. It was probably the barrier that their master had set up that blocked the detection of his divine sense. Guo pondered and said, "Master said that the Yama Lord might wake up, but it shouldn't be now." According to what Master said, the Yama Lord probably won't wake up until 3 to 5 years later. The fluctuations in the sea today are probably a sign that the Yama Lord's condition is gradually improving. Wei Feng said, "Since it's like that, then let's observe for 2 days and see what exactly is going on." "Okay." Guo responded. Seeing that there were no other strange phenomena on the surface of the sea other than the waves and the surging of spiritual energy, the two of them headed towards the flying ship first. "I wonder how Master is after ascending. Did she encounter any trouble?" Wei Feng couldn't help but look towards the sky as he spoke. Because of Master's ascension, even their communication jade with Master had been cut off. Even if they wanted to know about Master, they had no way of finding out. "Don't worry. Even if Master goes to the celestial world alone, she'll definitely take good care of herself. Even if she encounters trouble, with Master's ability and methods, could it be that you're worried that she won't be able to deal with it?" Guo revealed a wisp of a smile and said, "We only need to properly carry out the task of guarding Master here. Master said that she'll definitely return." "Right, didn't I hear from Du Fan that Hui Lang and Ying Yi are coming over? Why haven't they arrived yet?" Wei Feng asked as he recalled the two people he hadn't seen for a long time. It's not like you don't know that ever since the Yama Lord's accident, the two of them have taken over the Yama Lord's work. In addition, the world under the Yama Lord is in turmoil because of the Yama Lord situation. With so many things requiring their attention, how can they possibly leave? Guo descended onto the flying ship and called 2 Phoenix guards to patrol the surface of the sea, whereas, he and Wei Feng walked to the small table at the bow of the ship and sat down. He said, "They weren't even able to rush over when Master ascended, so it's obvious how busy they are." Wei Feng nodded. After he sat down, he poured 2 cups of wine and said, "Right, with the Yama Lord's current situation and Master isn't here, if they don't keep an eye on it, then it'll probably fall into chaos." The two of them had a few drinks on the spaceship and chatted. Time passed unknowingly, the celestial world. After Fingzhou sent off Chen, he instructed Fire Phoenix, Senior White, and the other contracted beasts to guard the celestial world while he left with Tan Yun. He intended to take a stroll in the territory she was in charge of. Dressed in red, she was as dazzling as the sun. Even if she restrained her pressure and cultivation, her outstanding temperament and peerless elegance still attracted the attention of everyone wherever she went. Chapter 48-21. However, the people here were afraid of the 4 great emperors. On the day of her ascension, not a single sovereign or immortal elder came to the island to congratulate her. Even though she did not take those people seriously, she could not allow them to look down on her. Today, she left her residence to take a look at her territory. Secondly, she wanted to see how they would deal with the problem of cutting off their supply of resources. Furthermore, there were too few people in her immortal residence, especially a lack of kitchen maids. Therefore, she wanted to bring a few people back with her. However, not long after she entered the city, she heard a commotion in front of her as she walked on the street. What's going on? Why did the price of the spiritual rice increase so much? This is not normal. A middle-aged man who looked like a housekeeper said. He frowned and shouted, "It's not the first time our Guo family has dealt with you. The price of the spiritual rice has increased so much. You should give us an explanation." Housekeeper Guo, the price of the spiritual rice is not up to us. It's my master. We have no choice. The shopkeeper in the shop sighed helplessly. Could it be that what I heard is true? A cultivator next to him said in surprise. What is true? Someone next to him asked. Don't you know? I heard a rogue cultivator friend say that someone above gave the order to cut off the supply of resources in our territory. I'm afraid that not long after, the price of the spiritual rice will not only increase, but it will also be difficult to find a single grain. The cultivator said with a serious expression. This can't be. Someone next to him said in shock. Why can't it be? It's not like you don't know that not long ago, our territory was divided under the jurisdiction of the newly ascended Great Emperor. It said that the newly ascended Great Emperor is a woman who ascended from the lower immortal world. Think about it, how can a woman who ascended from the lower immortal world compete with the other great emperors? The cultivator said. Seeing that everyone was listening curiously, he continued, moreover, it is said that this empress has a grudge with the other 4 great emperors. That's why such a thing happened. There is one more thing you must not know. I heard that other places are wantonly absorbing powerful families. I'm afraid that in a few years, there won't be many powerful people left in the territory under our empress's jurisdiction. How dare you? Who are you? How dare you bewitch people here? A delicate voice suddenly shouted, giving everyone a fright. The cultivator who spoke was even more shocked. He instinctively took a few steps back and looked for the voice. He found that it was a little girl of about 5 years old. She gave me a fright. So it's a little girl. The cultivator exhaled softly and calmed down. He looked at her from the corner of his eye and said coldly, "Little girl, you're quite imposing. But didn't your parents teach you not to be rude to your elders? Also, you're not bewitching people. You're just bewitching people with your lies." Chapter 48-22. In an inconspicuous corner, Feng Jiu was leaning against the wall. When he saw this scene and the little girl, he couldn't help but reveal a smile. Her smile was like a blossoming flower, like a spring breeze, and like a feather gently brushing across one's heart, causing those who were secretly looking at her to be involuntarily stunned. They foolishly stared at that beautiful face and that enchanting smile that bloomed at the corner of the beauty's lips. How could there be such a beauty in this world? Every frown and smile of hers could move one's heart and soul. Her eyes were even more enchanting, causing people to be uncontrollably captivated by her peerlessly beautiful face. Little girl, you need to be taught a lesson. The cultivator's face turned slightly red. He wanted to take a step forward to scare her, but he was stopped by someone next to him. I say, it's best if you don't touch her. This is the Shu family's most favored young miss. Steward Guo glanced at the cultivator and said, if she loses a single hair, you won't be able to leave this city alive. The cultivator's heart shook when he heard this. He quickly stopped and his face turned pale. Humph. When I go back, I'm going to tell grandfather that you're trying to confuse people with your lies. Our family won't casually move. Our family has lived here for generations, we won't move. The little girl's tender voice had the softness of a little girl and was very pleasing to the ear. Because the cultivator knew that this little girl was the young miss of the Shu clan, he didn't dare to say anything more. Instead, he said, I won't bicker with a little girl like you. With that, he flicked his sleeve and left the crowd. Hee, 11th young miss, do you still remember me? Steward Guo walked up with a smile and asked, why are you here alone? Your entourage. I remember, your big sister Guo's steward. The little girl smiled and 2 sweet little dimples appeared on her little face. Her voice was soft as she said, I came out with my second brother, but he saw big sister Guo and couldn't move, so I snuck away. Hearing this, Steward Guo was startled and asked, you're my young miss? Yes. The little girl nodded and pointed behind her, they're picking things from the treasure shop over there. Hearing this, Steward Guo quickly said, why don't 11th young miss come with us? It's not safe for you to be alone. Hee, it's very safe. My second brother often says that I look very safe. Also, many people in the city know me, so no one will hit me. She said with a smile. Feng Zhou, who was in the corner, couldn't help but burst out laughing when she heard her words. Perhaps because she heard the laughter, the little girl's chubby and cute little face wrinkled as she asked, who's laughing at me? She followed the voice and saw Feng Zhou, who was dressed in red, leaning against the corner of the wall. Wow! Her eyes widened, and her long eyelashes fluttered as she stared at Feng Zhou. At this time, the surrounding people also noticed the beautiful woman in red at the corner of the wall. For a moment, they were all stunned. Chapter 48-23. However, they had never seen someone like this woman who had the essence of heaven and earth. Not only was she beautiful, but her aura was also outstanding. Especially with her red dress, it was hard for people to take their eyes off her. There were thousands of beauties, but each had a different style. Even though they had seen many beauties in the cultivation world, they had to admit that the beauty of this woman in red was above all the beauties in the world. She was like a bright moon in the sky. When others were around her, no matter how dazzling they were, they could only shine like stars. When Feng Zhou saw that everyone was staring at her, her beautiful brows furrowed slightly, and the smile on her lips disappeared. She glanced at the cute little girl with baby fat and smiled at her, then turned to leave. Seeing the little girl, she couldn't help thinking of her daughter, Yu, who was also so cute. However, she hadn't seen them for a long time. She didn't know if they were used to following Emperor Qing. How much taller had they grown now? She wanted to see them, but she suppressed this idea as soon as it arose. Now was not the right time, she thought as she walked. After walking for a distance, she suddenly stopped and looked at the little girl beside her. She stopped when she stopped and looked at the little girl who was looking up at her with her chubby little face. Little girl, why are you following me? Feng Zhou raised her eyebrows and asked. Hee, sister, you are so beautiful. This is the first time Axayan has met someone as beautiful as you. She smiled sweetly, and with her smile, 2 cute little dimples appeared on her round little face. Without waiting for Feng Zhou to speak, she moved closer to Feng Zhou with small steps. She was so close that she was almost beside Feng Zhou. Feng Zhou looked at her, raised her eyebrows, and didn't say anything. She wanted to see what she wanted to do. My grandfather said that near ink is black, near vermilion will become red. Then if I get closer to you, will I become like you? Her soft words were naive, and Feng Zhou couldn't help laughing. What kind of family was the Shu family? How did they teach such a strange and cute little girl? Fengjiu smiled, squatted down, and said, Me. I'm old enough to be your mother, so you can't call me sister, but you can call me aunt. Also, even if you follow me and get close to me, you won't become like me. However, you're already very good like this. You're very cute and very lucky. She reached out and gently pinched the little girl's chubby little face, and chuckled, You are still young now. When you grow up, you will slowly become more beautiful. The little girl rolled her eyes and looked down at the hand that was pinching her little face. She blinked and asked, Then beautiful aunt, when Xin grows up in the future, will I become like beautiful aunt? You, Fengjiu's little girl, Fengjiuxu's eyes, you'll look like your father and mother, the little girl, her little, in the next moment, her little, frown, her little girl, and then, actually, her head raised her head, wah-ah. Woo-woo. I don't want to be like my father, woo-woo. I don't want to. Chapter 48-24. Alright. Don't cry anymore. You won't look good if you keep crying. She hurriedly coaxed him, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Hearing that he wouldn't look good if he kept crying, the little one hurriedly stopped and wiped away his tears. He looked at her pitifully and asked curiously, Beautiful aunt, do you have children? Are your children the same? Are they very good-looking? Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled. Thinking of her two little darlings, her gaze softened, Yes, they're a little older than you. They're twins and look exactly the same. They're both very good-looking. Wow! They look exactly the same. What would they look like? She exclaimed curiously, Xin has never seen two people who look exactly the same. Fengjiu smiled and rubbed her hair, saying, All right, you should go back quickly. Don't let your family worry. Beautiful aunt, can you send me home? I'll ask my grandfather to treat you to a meal. She looked up at her, her face full of hope. Fengjiu wanted to refuse, but seeing this little one looking at her expectantly, and the person who was called Butler Guo following behind, she thought for a moment, then said, I'll send you back. I'll leave after you get home. Hee, beautiful aunt, come with me. I'll take you home. She automatically ignored the last sentence and held Fengjiu's hand as they walked, saying, I live in a big courtyard with my grandfather. Usually, only my brothers come to the courtyard to play with me. Let me tell you, my grandfather is very powerful. He knows everything. He even knows how to make grasshoppers from grass for me. Fengjiu listened quietly, a smile on her lips. Hearing her mention her grandfather, she also thought of her grandfather. Now that she had ascended to this place alone, she might not be able to see them for a long time in the future. Although she was reluctant to part with them, she knew that they were all well, and that was enough. At the same time, the Shu residence's guards hurried over and found their family's second young master in the shop. Second young master, go back quickly. Something happened at home. Second young master Shu had just bought a jade hairpin for his sweetheart and was chatting with her. When he heard the guard's anxious words, he couldn't help but be startled, asking, What happened at home? Someone came to seek revenge, and there are quite a few strong cultivators. Second young master, bring little miss back quickly. As the guard spoke, he looked around but couldn't see the little figure. He couldn't help but ask, Second young master, where's little miss? That was the pearl in the hands of the Shu family's masters. Xin. Isn't Xin here? He was shocked. Only now did he remember his little sister. He looked around, but he didn't see the little girl's figure. His handsome face was full of anxiety. She was here just now. How did she disappear? The Guo family's fourth young mistress said as she turned to the servants beside her, "Hurry up and help me find Xian, Young miss, second young master." Housekeeper Guo walked in and said, "I saw 11th young miss on the street just now. She left with a lady in red. I was worried that 11th young miss would be in danger, so I followed her for a while. Later, I saw little miss leading that lady to the Shu residence, so I came to fetch my young miss." Chapter 48-25. On the other side, Fengjiu was sending the little girl home. She originally planned to leave after sending her home, but who knew that the little girl would cry and beg her to go in. Helpless, she could only follow her into the courtyard. Listening to the little girl's incessant chatter along the way, she knew that this courtyard was still quite a distance away from the main courtyard. This was also the place where the old master of the Shu family usually lived, so it was relatively quiet. "Where's my grandfather?" The little girl looked around but didn't see her grandfather's figure, so she grabbed a servant girl and asked. Replying to 11th young miss, third elder just came to ask the old master to go to the front. "He just left not long ago." As the servant girl spoke, she lowered her head, not daring to look at the beautiful woman in red. "Then ask the small kitchen to make some delicious food for us and send it to the pavilion." She spoke with the appearance of a little adult, dutifully playing the role of a little host to entertain guests. "Yes." The servant girl replied, then retreated. Fengjiu sat in the pavilion, one hand supporting her cheek as she watched. She felt that although this little girl was young, she was quite good at doing things. It was just that sometimes she would say some idioms wrongly. However, at her age, she was already considered good, because she had the innocence and kindness of a child, but also the aura of a noble family's daughter. The people in the small kitchen worked very quickly, and in about half an incense's time, the dishes were served one after another. The two of them, one adult and one child, ate in this quiet and secluded courtyard, very satisfied. "Beautiful aunt, I like to eat this dish the most. It's so delicious." The little girl picked up a piece of meat and stuffed it into her mouth. She ate with a satisfied expression, and even recommended Fengjiu to eat. Fengjiu didn't stand on ceremony and tried a bit of each dish. Although these dishes were quite delicious, her mouth had long been spoiled by the previous cook. She felt that no matter how delicious these dishes were, they couldn't compare to the dishes made by the previous cook. Thus, after eating a bit, she put down her chopsticks. However, just as Fengjiu got up and walked around to help with digestion, she suddenly felt a wave of fluctuation in the air. Her brows raised slightly, and she released her divine sense to investigate. At this moment, in front of the main gate of the Shu clan, corpses were strewn all over the ground. Fresh blood flowed out, and the smell of blood permeated the air. As they fought, a powerful qi filled the air. The members of the Shu clan were covered in wounds of various sizes. Standing at the front of the Shu clan's gate were the Shu clan's patriarch and the Shu clan's patriarch. At this moment, the Shu clan's patriarch's hand that was holding the sword was bleeding. There was also a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth that had not been wiped away. Old Master Shu wasn't injured, but his face was pale, as if he was enduring something. In the next moment, he spat out a mouthful of blood. "Father! Old Master! Grandfather!" Cries of alarm rang out. Old Master Shu raised his hand, indicating that they didn't need to worry. After wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, he looked at the people in front of him and asked in a deep voice, "What do you want before you'll stop?" "Stop. Ha 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 ha." Chapter 48-26. Hearing this, the faces of the Shu family members turned ugly. Especially at this time, an elder stepped forward and whispered into the ears of Patriarch Shu and Patriarch Shu. When the aristocratic families in the city heard that we were in trouble, they all said that their ancestors were either absent or in closed-door cultivation and were unwilling to help. Hearing this, the two of them felt their hearts sink. There were only 4 people on the other side, but they were all extremely strong cultivators. With the Shu family's strength, they might be able to fight 1 or 2 of them, but against 4, they had no chance of winning. At this moment, in the rear courtyard, after Feng Zhou's divine sense probed the situation in front, she turned to look at the little girl who was still lying on the table and eating meat. She couldn't help but shake her head and reveal a helpless smile. How did she end up encountering the Shu family's troubles the moment she stepped out of the door and into the Shu family's residence? She clasped her hands behind her back and walked around the courtyard. Looking at the fresh flowers planted in the courtyard, she reached out to pluck one and played with it. Xan, she called out to the little girl in the pavilion. Beautiful aunt, what's the matter? Hearing Feng Zhou call her, she quickly put down her chopsticks and took a big gulp of the soup in her bowl. Only then did she jog over. Feng Zhou glanced at her and smiled. I have a contracted beast. My child used to love riding it everywhere. Do you want to ride it? Can I? Hearing this, her eyes couldn't help but light up. 2 cute little dimples appeared on her round little face. She nodded vigorously. Beautiful aunt, I want to ride it, I want to ride it. Feng Zhou's lips curved slightly. He raised his hand and the cloud-swallowing beast appeared in front of her. When the cloud-swallowing beast came out, it glanced at its master and knew what she meant. It lowered its body so that the little girl could climb onto its back. Wow! What a big beast! The little girl wasn't afraid and excitedly climbed onto the beast's back with her short legs. It's called the cloud-swallowing beast. Feng Zhou said with a smile. Cloud-swallowing beast. Does it eat clouds? She stroked Tun Yun's fur curiously. When she saw how docile and obedient it was, she could not help but feel emboldened. She clamped her legs together and swallowed Tun Yun's fur with both hands. She said to Feng Zhou, beautiful auntie, I'll send it to Grandpa to take a look. Grandpa will definitely be shocked. He. Feng Zhou smiled as he watched her smile happily and ride away on Tun Yun. He played with the flowers in his hand and strolled around the courtyard with light steps to aid digestion. Along the way, the maidservants and guards who saw the cloud-swallowing beast were startled. The maidservant shouted for the carriage to go forward. However, she was stopped before she reached the front yard. Xan, where did this beast come from? Why are you riding it? Come down quickly. When a man in his 30s saw the ferocious beast his niece was riding, his face turned pale. He wanted to go forward, but he didn't dare to. Second uncle, where's Grandpa? I rode it to show Grandpa. The little girl didn't understand his fear and continued to talk to him with a smile. Your grandpa and the others are in front of the gate. Something happened at home. Someone came to seek revenge and many people were killed or injured. You should go back quickly. It's not safe in front. The man wanted to go forward, but he saw the beast glance at him. He couldn't help but freeze in place, unable to move. Chapter 48:27. It wasn't here to let the little girl ride it for fun. Instead, its master had sent it to the front to solve the problem. It didn't have time to hang around here. Seeing the beast stride forward, the man broke out in a cold sweat. He raised his hand to wipe his sweat and muttered, where did this beast come from? Why is it so scary with just one look? Also, the aura on that beast, could I have seen wrongly? He was a little dizzy. After taking a deep breath, he hurriedly chased after it. The little girl rode Tun Yun to the front. Because she was sitting on Tun Yun's back, she could see the scene in front of her from a distance. Coincidentally, she saw that her grandfather was fighting with two people. One of them was about to launch a sneak attack from behind. The wind from his palm condensed a strong pressure. Seeing that it was about to land on her grandfather's back, she shouted in shock. "Grandfather!" Tun Yun leaped forward and flung the little girl sitting on its back. At the same time, it shouted, "Catch her!" When the man who rushed over heard Tun Yun's words and saw his little niece being flung over, he instinctively reached out to catch her. When he hugged his little niece in his arms, he let out a sigh of relief. Thank goodness, thank goodness. You're not hurt, right?" "Woo, second master, someone hit grandfather." The little girl's eyes turned red and she started crying. Roar! Almost at that moment, the beast-swallowing cloud let out a roar. That roar carried the pressure of a sacred beast as well as a powerful aura. Almost at the same time, the three people who were fighting were startled and instinctively looked towards the direction where the roar came from. What they saw was an awe-inspiring sacred beast pouncing towards them. Its aura was ferocious, and it carried with it a shocking bloodthirsty killing intent. In just a split second, the arm of the person who was about to attack Old Master Shu was torn off by swallowing cloud. Hiss! Ah! The sound of a gasp was heard, followed by a blood-curdling scream. That scream instantly reached the clouds and reverberated in the sky. Those who heard it couldn't help but shiver. Old Master Shu didn't react. He only stared with wide eyes at the sacred beast that came out of nowhere and tore off the immortal monarch's arm. At the same time, he was sent flying in the direction of the main door. His son and the rest supported him. Sacred, sacred beast. Their voices were filled with unconcealable astonishment and disbelief. Obviously, none of them had expected that a sacred beast would suddenly appear in the Shu clan. Furthermore, this sacred beast's battle prowess was so strong. Almost at that instant, other than the immortal monarch whose arm had been torn off, who couldn't dodge in time, the other three quickly retreated. However, the immortal monarch whose arm had been torn off wasn't so lucky. He couldn't dodge in time and was bitten by Tun Yun. Tun Yun then slammed him to the ground. Tun Yun stomped on his body, and the sound of bones breaking could be heard. Faintly, it was as if his inner core had shattered into pieces at this moment, producing a slight cracking sound. Save me! That person lay on the ground and looked in the direction of the other three people. As he spoke, blood flowed out of his mouth. Hiss! The young lady from before has already left. Hearing this, they could not help being stunned. Left? He saved their Shu family and actually left just like that. What kind of person was he? Beautiful Auntie left. Why did Auntie Beauty leave? The little girl was anxious. She turned around to look at her grandfather and asked, "Grandpa, what should we do if beautiful Auntie leaves?" "Father, who do you think the person who saved us is?" Clan Master Shu asked. Chapter 48-29. Little Shu Axian looked at her grandfather in confusion. There were some things that she couldn't understand, and didn't know. But she only knew that the beautiful auntie she brought home for dinner today was very powerful. Her contracted beast saved her grandfather and saved the Shu family. At this moment, Fengzhou, who had left the Shu family, was strolling in a shop. She had only entered the Shu family by chance. For the sake of that little girl, she had conveniently resolved their family's crisis. Since she had eaten and the crisis had been resolved, there was no need for her to stay there and wait for them to thank her. "Shopkeeper, do you have any good kitchen knives here?" A girl's delicate voice was heard. Fingjo, who was looking at things in front of the counter, couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and look over. She saw a 16 or 17-year-old girl walk in. She was wearing a neat green dress and had 2 braids. She wasn't stunningly beautiful, but her facial features were well defined and she was very youthful and pretty. "Hee, miss, how can we have kitchen knives here? The knives we sell here are all of the best quality. They are for self-defense, not for cutting vegetables," the shopkeeper said with a smile. "I don't want an ordinary kitchen knife. I want something of better quality, the kind that won't be chipped even if I cut the bones of a spirit cow." As the woman spoke, she walked forward and said, "Where are your knives? Let me see for myself." "All right, see if there are any suitable ones." "They're here." The shopkeeper smiled and brought her to the place where the knives were. When Fengjiu heard this, she found it interesting, so she also watched from the side. Seeing the young girl pick and choose and finally buy 2 small knives, she asked, "Shopkeeper, are there any weapon refiners in the city?" "Hee, miss, there are, but they only refine weapons and don't know how to refine kitchen knives." The shopkeeper smiled and said, "Miss, I'll wrap these 2 small knives for you." "No need." As the girl spoke, she took out a rectangular box and placed the 2 newly bought knives in 2 empty spaces. Fengjiu glanced at it and saw that there were all kinds of knives and cooking utensils inside. Seeing that she had everything, her eyes flashed and a smile appeared on her lips. "Miss, you like to cook?" The girl turned around as if she had just seen such a beauty. She blinked and stared at Fengjiu for a while before exclaiming, "So beautiful, which family's young miss are you? Why are you so beautiful? I didn't see you just now." Hearing that, Fengjiu smiled lightly. "Do you like to cook? How are your culinary skills?" "I like to cook. My culinary skills, in my family, but in my family's family, but outside, I haven't met anyone who can cook better than me," she said with a smile. Her face was full of confidence and pride. "Oh." Fengjiu, Ts not know how to cook, T Ts Fengjius. Chapter 48-30. Fengjiu was slightly surprised. "They're such an aristocratic family. I've never heard of it." She had just ascended, and the information that Imo-chin had given her was only about powerful people. Indeed, she had never heard of such an aristocratic family before. At this time, the shopkeeper at the side couldn't help but come over and said, "I know Chef God Song. He is indeed a person who relies on cooking to improve his cultivation. His dishes are all made from rare spirit beasts. The meat of spirit beasts can strengthen the aura of spiritual energy in the body, but the dishes made by Chef God Song will be more than 10 times more effective. It is said that his most famous dish is the medicinal cuisine that he developed. It is a delicacy that can cure diseases and is difficult to buy even with money." As he spoke, the shopkeeper looked at the young lady in green and exclaimed, "I didn't expect you to be from the Song family. My apologies for not recognizing you. How is it? Amazing, right?" The young lady raised her chin, her face full of pride. Fengjiu thought for a while and said, "I didn't expect such a chef to exist. I'm really ignorant." She smiled and had an idea. She was looking for a chef. If there really was such a chef, she had to invite him to her immortal abode. "I didn't expect it. She's actually from Chef God Song's family." A man's voice sounded. A man in brocade robes walked in with his hands behind his back. Behind him were a few guards and a middle-aged man. At first, the man in brocade robes looked at the young lady, but he didn't expect to see a beauty in red. "This young lady is..." The man's eyes were filled with amazement, and he couldn't help but be distracted for a moment. Fengzhou didn't say anything. She only glanced at the man indifferently and looked away. "Elder sister, let me treat you to a meal. I just bought 2 knives, and I could try them out," the young lady in green said and looked at Fengzhou. Fengzhou, who had just been treated to a meal, couldn't help but smile when she heard that she was being treated again. However, she didn't refuse and replied, "Okay. Let's go," the young lady in green said and was about to walk forward. "Hee, don't be in such a hurry to leave." The man in embroidered clothes reached out to stop her and said, "I've heard that Master Chef Song's family has good culinary skills. It's rare to meet a lady here. Why don't you follow me home? TSK. Do you think I'm someone you can invite?" The girl in green sneered and raised her foot to kick the man in embroidered clothes. A good dog doesn't block the way. The moment she made her move, the man quickly dodged and retreated. His face darkened and he immediately ordered, "Capture her for this young master." "Elder sister, back off." The girl in green pushed Fengzhou aside and took out a frying pan from her space. She then smacked the 2 guards on the head. Fengzhou retreated and watched from the side. When he saw the young girl use a frying pan, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. When he saw that her attacks were inexplicably strange, he couldn't help but concentrate. After carefully observing for a while, a trace of astonishment appeared on his face. He didn't see wrongly. This young girl's attacks were clearly the movements of frying vegetables and cutting meat. Looking at her posture, it was as if she was going to deal with the 2 guards as if they were her dishes. Chapter 48-31. Their clothes were torn to shreds, and the 2 guards were left with only a pair of underwear with several holes. Their faces immediately turned red, and their hands instinctively covered the area between their legs. At the same time, they quickly retreated. "Useless things." The brocade-robed man was furious, and said to the middle-aged man beside him, "Take her down." "Yes." The middle-aged man responded, and instantly attacked the girl in green. Fengzhou looked at the girl in green. Her skills were not bad. Although her style was strange, it was undeniable that her unique attack method was very lethal. However, the middle-aged man's cultivation was above hers, and he could probably handle a few moves. After a long battle, the winner would be decided. Therefore, she stood to the side and watched. When she saw that the girl in green was unable to dodge the middle-aged man's attack, she attacked with a silver needle and instantly pierced the middle-aged man's acupuncture point. At that moment, his movements slowed down, and he let out a muffled groan. He instinctively wanted to retreat, but the girl in green had already reacted, and slammed the frying pan with all her might. Bang! Pooh! The bottom of the frying pan directly hit the middle-aged man's face, and the force was so great that he was sent flying. Blood spurted out of his mouth, and the middle-aged man fell to the ground. In an instant, shock and fear flashed across his eyes, and he couldn't help but look at Fengzhou. "Damn it! You just wait!" The brocade-robed man shouted angrily. Seeing that the girl in green was so fierce, he didn't dare to fight, and instead prepared to escape. However, at this moment, Fengzhou reached out and flicked a silver needle, which pierced one of the man's acupuncture points. The man's legs went soft, and he fell forward, rolling and crawling out of the shop. "You dare to have ideas about this great aunt, and you didn't even ask if my frying pan agreed." The girl in green snorted, and hurriedly checked the bottom of her frying pan. Seeing that it was still fine, she couldn't help but grin. The quality of my brother's frying pan is good. Fengjiu couldn't help but chuckle when he heard this. He walked over and looked at her. I didn't expect you to be so skilled. Of course, people in my family not only know how to cook, but we're also very good at fighting. She raised her chin and said to Fengjiu, elder sister, why didn't you bring someone to protect you? You have such an unsafe face, and you'll attract a lot of trouble outside. You're lucky you met me today, or you would have been caught by them. Let me tell you, there aren't many good young masters from aristocratic families. They all use their family's power, and do evil, especially when they see a beautiful woman. Fengjiu chuckled and said, isn't the Song family a noble family as well? Of your brother of the family of the aristocratic families of aristocratic families. How is it different? Fengjiu asked, amused. Anyway, it's different. They wouldn't do such a wicked thing. The girl in green said, and then said, elder sister, I said I would treat you to a meal. Come, let's go to a restaurant. I'll personally cook and treat you to a good meal. Fengjiu smiled and said, why don't you treat me tonight? I was just treated to a full meal, and if I eat now, I won't be able to eat anymore. Chapter 48-32. Hearing her say this, Fengjiu nodded and accompanied her to buy a knife. Along the way, she listened to her talk about her family. She roughly understood that there was such a family. However, after Fengjiu accompanied her around, she still couldn't find a suitable kitchen knife. In the evening, the two of them walked into a restaurant. Song Mi-er borrowed the restaurant's kitchen and personally cooked a table of dishes for her. Looking at the table full of delicious dishes, Fengjiu raised her eyebrows and said, they all look delicious. Big sister Feng, try it. I know how to make many other dishes, but I don't have the ingredients here, so I can only make do, Song Mi-er said as she picked up some food for Fengjiu. She looked at her and waited for her evaluation. Seeing this, Fengjiu picked up her chopsticks and took a bite of the golden fried thing in the bowl. It was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. The meat was fresh and juicy, and the aftertaste was endless. Moreover, there was a wave of spiritual energy that flowed through her body as she swallowed the meat. She couldn't help but nod and say, it's very fragrant. What meat is this? How can it be so delicious? Hee, there just happened to be a freshly killed black spirit pig in the kitchen. I took the most tender and delicious piece of its meat to make this dish for Big Sister Feng. This piece of meat is also very good for stir-frying. It's a pity that there's only one piece in a spirit pig, so it's only enough to make one dish. Hearing this, Fengjiu gave her a thumbs up and said, your cooking skills are really good. I used to have a cook who was also very good at cooking, but compared to her, you're better by 3 points. You're really not simple. Being praised by Fengjiu, she smiled happily and picked up some food for her. Big sister Feng, try this. This is. Next, she picked up some food for Fengjiu while explaining how the dish was made. Fengjiu just nodded and didn't say a word. She only focused on eating the food in her bowl. It wasn't until more than half of the dishes on the table were in her stomach that she put down her chopsticks. She exhaled lightly and said with a satisfied expression, I'm so full. I haven't eaten so full in a long time. Every dish is delicious. It's so delicious that I don't want to stop. My family's cooking is very good. My cooking skills are not even on the list in my family. She said with a smile. Seeing her eat with satisfaction, she was also happy to see her cook. You were so busy picking up food for me that you didn't eat much, Fengjiu said. She stood up and walked for a while to help with digestion. Big sister Feng, haven't you heard of the saying, even 3 years of famine won't starve the stove to death. She winked at her and said with a charming face, people who cook are usually full before the dishes are served. Think about it, try this dish, try that dish. Chapter 48-33. Fengjiu smiled, I know, I won't be going home either. I still have other matters to attend to. Also, if you follow me while I'm away and cook for me, I can ask Master Tai to refine a kitchen knife for you, a big knife for cutting beast bones. What do you think? Master Tai. She opened her eyes wide and asked in astonishment, is Sister Feng talking about the top refining master, Master Ironbone? Yes, that's him. Fengjiu nodded with a smile. She knew that in one of the territories of the 4 great emperors, there was such an expert in refining weapons. Because this person was tough and had a bad temper, very few people could ask for a weapon made by him. But it's not easy to get his weapon. Also, my father couldn't get a knife when he went to ask for one. How could he? It wasn't that she didn't want to believe it, but it was simply impossible. You only need to say if you're interested or not. Fengjiu asked. Song Mi looked at her and thought for a moment before nodding, all right, I'll go with you. Fengjiu smiled, then let's go. It's time to get down to business. If they cut off the resources in her territory, she would go to the 4 great emperors' territories and stir up trouble. If they wanted to poach her territory, she would find a chance to destroy one of them. She would take over his territory. Currently, the clans and powerhouses in her territory were afraid of the 4 great emperors' prestige and didn't dare to submit to her. They felt that as a woman, even if she ascended to the position of Phoenix Lord, she was still just a woman. For experts, it was as difficult to make them submit to a woman as it was for them to ascend to the martial emperor realm. After all, women had always been at a disadvantage since ancient times. Unless she did something to make them submit to her from the bottom of their hearts, it was very difficult to make them submit to her. To her, things that could be resolved with force were much easier. She was more than willing to prove everything with her strength. Song Mi didn't know Fengjiu's background, only that she was called Fengjiu. She didn't think that she was related to the Phoenix Lord who ascended not long ago. After all, such a supreme figure was in existence she didn't even dare to think about. In her heart, such a powerhouse would appear and disappear mysteriously. Naturally, she wouldn't run into one so easily. The two paid the bill and headed out. Song Mi followed beside her. Seeing her walking towards the city gates, she couldn't help but ask, Big sister, are we leaving the city? Let's go somewhere else. Fengjiu replied and led her towards the city gates. However, as soon as they left the gates, a shout came from behind. It's them. Catch them. Don't let them escape. Fengjiu and Song Mi turned around and saw that it was the subordinates of the embroidered-robed man they'd dealt with in the shop. However, the leader this time was replaced by 2 middle-aged men. Behind them was the middle-aged man who'd been hit by Song Mi's frying pan. They're here for revenge, let's go. Song Mi said and hurriedly pulled Fengjiu away. Chapter 48-34. If Du Fan and the others were here, they would have people they could use. Then, she wouldn't have to wait for them to come back and deal with this clan. The pursuers watched as the two left on their swords. They only gave them a hateful glare before leading their men back. The two of them fled very quickly. They couldn't catch up to them even if they wanted to. It was best to return and report to the clan head first. They might have let them escape this time, but the next time they come to this city, they won't let them escape. Half a month later. In a bustling city, Song-mi-er glanced at Fengzhou from time to time. Her eyes were filled with confusion. "What's wrong?" Fengzhou asked. She continued to walk forward slowly, her gaze fixed in front of her. Song-mi-er paused and said, "Elder sister, just who are you?" "The people we met yesterday were so powerful, but they left with their tails between their legs. I know that big sister must have done something to make them so frightened." Fengzhou chuckled. "I didn't do anything. I just used my aura to suppress them. They knew that they were no match for me. Naturally, they wouldn't dare to make an enemy out of us." As she spoke, she turned her head slightly and looked at her. "Don't worry. I won't take you to sell." Song-mi-er smiled in embarrassment. "I know. I was just curious." Her clan was a very large one. She had seen all kinds of people, but the more she interacted with her, the more she felt that she wasn't a simple person. However, she had never heard of the Phone Clan. Fengzhou smiled and didn't say much. She entered an inn with her. In the room, she said, "Rest here today. I need to go out and do something. If I'm quick, I'll be back in a day. If I'm slow, I'll be back in 2 or 3 days." With that, she waved her sleeve and Tun Yun appeared from the space. However, it wasn't its original body. It was small and looked tame and harmless. "It's my contracted beast. When I'm not around, let it follow you. If you meet with danger that you can't deal with, it can at least protect you." Fengzhou glanced at Tun Yun on the ground and instructed her with her consciousness. Wow! What a cute little beast. After all, she was a young girl. Seeing such a cute little pet, her eyes couldn't help but light up. However, when she touched the little beast's round and meaty body, she couldn't help but smile. So much meat. The meat of this little beast should be very fresh and delicious. In an instant, several dishes flashed through her mind. She thought about how to make them taste better if they were made into dishes. Hearing her words, Tun Yun let out 2 puffs of air from its nose. It shook its head and shook off the hand that was touching it. Poochie. Fengzhou could not help but chuckle. She shook her head helplessly and said, "Me-her, don't try to make a dish out of little beasts whenever you see them." She glanced at Tun Yun and said, "It's called Tun Yun. It's no ordinary little beast. Cloud devouring." Mi-er's eyes lit up as she looked at the white ball that had walked to the side and jumped onto a chair. She smiled and said, "It's been a long time since I've made a yuntuan. Big sister, I'll go make some for you later. Eat it before you leave." You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.